Henry Chettle was an English dramatist and miscellaneous writer of the Elizabethan era, best known for his pamphleteering. Early life. The son of Robert Chettle, a London dyer, he was apprenticed in 1577 and became a member of the Stationers' Company in 1584, travelling to Cambridge on the behalf in 1588. His career as a print and author is shadowy. He may have set up some of the tracts printed in response to Martin Marprelate. In 1591, he entered into partnership with William Hoskins and John Dante, two stationers. They published a good many ballads, and some plays, including a surreptitious and botched first quarto of Romeo and Juliet, to which it is suggested Chettle added lines and stage directions. The Groat's Worth of Wit. In 1592, Green's Groat's Worth of Wit, supposedly the work of the recently deceased, and very popular, Robert Greene, was published, having been entered in the register of the Stationers' Company, at the peril of Henry Chettle. This contained a passage criticizing various playwrights which offended at least two contemporary writers, one probably the alleged atheist Christopher Marlowe and the other possibly William Shakespeare. Chettle was accused of writing the work under Greene's name. He denied the charge in the preface to his Kind Heart's Dream, published later that year, about 3 months since died Robert Greene, leaving many papers in sundry booksellers' hands, among other his Groat's Worth of Wit, in which a letter written to divers playmakers is offensively by one or two of them taken, and because on the dead they cannot be avenged, they wilfully forge in their conceits a living author. With neither of them that take offence was I acquainted, and with one of them I care not if I never be. The other, whom at that time I did not so much spare as since I wish I had, for that, as I have moderated the heat of living writers and might have used my own discretion, that I did not, I am as sorry as if the original fault had been my fault, because myself have seen his demeanour no less civil than he excellent in the quality he professes. Besides, the diver of worship have reported his uprightness of dealing, which argues his honesty, and his facetious grace in writing that approves his art. The theory that Greene's Groat's Wit is a forgery by Chettle has been both supported and challenged by scholars. In 1935, Harold Jenkins attributed the work to Greene, not Chettle. However, a pioneering 1969 computer-aided stylometric analysis by Warren B. Austin firmly attributed it to Chettle. Austin's views were challenged in 2006 by Richard Westley. Linked to Henslow, he seems to have been generally in debt, judging from numerous entries in Philip Henslow's diary of advances for various purposes, on one occasion to pay his expenses in the Marshalsea prison, on another to get his play out of pawn. He made a greater number of small borrowings from Henslow than any other person. These and Henslow's casual records of them suggest some friendship between them, though in 1602 Chettle seems to have been writing for both Worcester's Company and the Admiral's, despite signing a bond to write exclusively for the latter. Works. As early as 1598, Francis Mears includes Chettle in his Palladia as one of the best for comedy, and Henslow lists payments to him for 36 plays between 1598 and 1603, and he may have been involved in as many as 50 plays, although only a dozen seem to be his alone. Chettle had regular association with Henry Porter, Thomas Dekker, and after 1600 with John Day. Of the 13 plays usually attributed to Chettle's sole authorship, only one was printed. This was the tragedy of Hoffman, or A Revenge for a Father. It has been suggested that this piece was put forward as a rival to Shakespeare's Hamlet. There is also evidence that Chettle contributed to the play Sir Thomas More, which is famous for containing a scene which many scholars believe to be authored by Shakespeare. Chettle's non-dramatic writings include Piers Plane, A 7 Years' Apprenticeship, the story of a fictitious apprenticeship in Crete and Thrace, and England's Mourning Garment, in which are included included some verses alluding to the chief poets of the time. Death. He died before 1607, when Dekker in his Knight's Conjurer described him joining the poets in Elysium. In comes Chettle sweating and blowing by reason of his fatness. Bibliography. Jenkins, H. The Life and Work of Henry Chettle. Carson, N. A Companion to Henslow's Diary. Folks, R.A. and Rickett, R.T. Henslow's Diary. List of plays. The Valiant Welchman, by Michael Drayton and Henry Chettle, February 1597–8. Printed in 1615. Earl Goodwin and His Three Sons, Part 1, by Michael Drayton, Henry Chettle, Thomas Dekker, and Robert Wilson, March 1598. Not printed. Earl Goodwin, Part 2, by the same authors, and under the same date in Henslow's papers. Not printed. Piers of Exton, by the same authors, same date. Not printed. Black Batman of the North, Part 1, by Henry Chettle, April 1598. Not printed. Black Batman of the North, Part 2, by Henry Chettle and Robert Wilson. Same date. Not printed. It is mentioned in Henslow's diary in April 1598. No extant copies of the play are known. The Play of a Woman, by Henry Chettle, July 1598. Not printed. The Conquest of Brute with the First Finding of the Bath, by John Day, Henry Chettle, and John Singer. Same date. Not printed. Hot Angus Soon Cold, by Henry Porter, Henry Chettle, and Ben Jonson, August 1598. Not printed. Cateline's Conspiracy, by Robert Wilson and Henry Chettle. Same date. Not printed. 'Tis No Deceit to Deceive the Deceiver, by Henry Chettle, September 1598. Not printed. Unny's Revenge, with the Tragedy of Polyphemus, by Henry Chettle, February 1598–9. Not printed. Agamemnon, by Henry Chettle and Thomas Dekker, June 1599. Not printed. Malone thought that this was the same play as Troilus and Cressida, before mentioned. The Stepmother's Tragedy, by Henry Chettle, August 1599. Not printed. Patient Gristle, by Thomas Dekker, Henry Chettle, and William Horton, December 1599. Printed in 1603. The Arcadian Virgin, by Henry Chettle and William Horton. Same date. Not printed. Mentioned in Philip Henslow's diary in December 1599. Daemonum Pythias, by Henry Chettle, January 1599–1600. Not printed. The Seven Wise Masters, by Henry Chettle, Thomas Dekker, William Horton, and John Day, March 1599–1600. Not printed. The Golden Ass and Cupid and Psyche, by Thomas Dekker, John Day, and Henry Chettle, April 1600. Not printed. The Wooing of Death, by Henry Chettle, same date. Not printed. The Blind Beggar of Bethnal Green, by Henry Chettle and John Day. Same date. Printed in 1659. All Is Not Gold That Glisters, by Samuel Rowley and Henry Chettle, March 1600. Not printed. Sebastian, King of Portugal, by Henry Chettle and Thomas Dekker, April 1601. Not printed. Cardinal Wolsey, Part 1, by Henry Chettle, August 1601. Not printed. Cardinal Wolsey, Part 2, by Henry Chettle, May 1602. Not printed. The Orphan's Tragedy, by Henry Chettle, September 1601. Not printed. Too Good to Be True, by Henry Chettle, Richard Hathaway, and Wentworth Smith, November 1601. Not printed. Love Parts Friendship, by Henry Chettle and Wentworth Smith, May 1602. Not printed. Tobias, by Henry Chettle. Same date. Not printed. Jephthah, by Henry Chettle. Same date. Not printed. A Danish Tragedy, by Henry Chettle. Same date. Not printed. Themelanco, by Henry Chettle and Robinson, September 1602. Not printed. Lady Jane, Part 1, by Henry Chettle, Thomas Dekker, Thomas Hayward, Wentworth Smith, and John Webster, November 1602. Not printed. Lady Jane, Part 2, by the same authors. Smith accepted. Same date. Not printed. The London Florentine, Part 1, by Thomas Hayward and Henry Chettle, December 1602. Not printed. The London Florentine, Part 2, by the same authors. Same date. Not printed. The Tragedy of Hoffmann, by Henry Chettle. Same date. Printed in 1631. Jane Shore, by Henry Chettle and John Day, March 1602-3. Not printed.